Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today we have another Firearms Fact episode for you, and I hope that you're all having a great week and things are going well. I have a special guest here with me today on this presentation, Mr. Matt Mallory from Meet the Pressers. He's a firearms instructor, law enforcement officer up in New York. Really good dude. And today we're going to be talking about less than lethal options. Now, I know here on the channel, we spend a lot of time talking about different firearms tech. We've done some body armor testing over the years. So we've already sort of, maybe dove into the concept of passive ways to protect yourself, right? I mean, armor is a very passive way to protect yourself. Even if you don't own a gun, you can still own body armor, right? Even if you don't own a firearm for home defense, doesn't mean you can't install a night lock at night or beef up your home defenses to keep people out. So there are many passive ways that you can protect yourself. And also, when we get into less than lethal, it's sort of getting into the middle of that concept in a way, right? Where less than lethal, means less than lethal. It doesn't mean that's not completely, not deadly, but that the intention, I suppose, Matt, with less than lethal is that you're trying to create an environment where, hey, I want you to know I'm here. I want to be dynamic. I want to, use some form of force against you to let you know, hey, I mean business. But that force is not going to result in your death. Definitely. Is that the overall?
Yeah, for sure.
Concept?
And thanks for having me again. I always love hanging out with you. I struggled with less lethal and less than lethal. And I kind of looked at both terms and kind of dug down into it. And I settled on less lethal because less lethal implies that it could be lethal if somebody has asthma. When we talk pepper spray, could be lethal if somebody has a heart condition. When we talk taser, right? Where less than lethal might lean a little bit more towards like there's no way that it's going to be lethal kind of thing.
Yeah, or someone could get tased at the top of a staircase and fall down 2 flights of
or
stairs
into
and
water.
break their neck.
Right, exactly. Or off a bridge, right,
Sure.
Exactly. So there's a lot of so and in the industry, both terms are used freely. But words are important in that sense, and that's why I stick with like the less lethal as an instructor because I want people to understand that it could result in something happening more than that.
Right. So don't assume that just because it is meant to be a less than lethal or less lethal device, that it still in certain situations can't hurt somebody, and that you shouldn't treat it with the equal amount of respect that you would any other type of firearm or device or whatever, knife. I mean, like whatever, right?
Like the shock knife. Now, that's a training aid that I use in classes to get that cognitive thought process. So we'll do like the Tooler drill. We'll have somebody run at somebody with a shock knife.
Ooh.
Right. And they'll try to stab them with a shock knife while the other person's trying to draw the firearm, the CERT or UTM gun or whatever, and try to engage that individual and get shots on that person before they touch them with a knife. So we run the Tooler drill, 21-foot roll, FBI's edge weapon drill, whatever, to be able to try to see and show how fast somebody can cover 21 feet, which is 1.475 seconds, or it's 2 seconds at 42 feet.
So a heck of a lot quicker than
most
people tend to think that someone can really cover the ground if they're really trying to do it. Yeah. And I think also what comes into play when you're getting in that type of training where you give someone that knife and you say, all right, you have to shock them with this before they pull the UTM and get you, it becomes a race. It does. Where it's like, all right, I'm going to see how fast I can clear this 21 feet.
Yep.
And then the other person who's getting, attacked is going to be like, I'm going to see how fast I can clear leather and shoot this guy.
Exactly.
And then it makes you better in both of those situations.
Becomes a competition.
And I would imagine you trade the students out so that they all have opportunity to experience that, because it's also important for them when they're getting into that to go, hey, like, wow, I didn't realize how fast somebody could clear 21 feet because look how fast I just cleared it. Right. Maybe I'm not super athletic. Maybe I'm not super fast, but yet look how fast I did it. When you introduce that danger element, people act faster.
Yeah,
and with a sense of urgency.
It's like that concept of you go to the range and you shoot paper targets. Marksmanship's good, but taking to that next level, you do simulations, right? You'll have like a screen with a video playing, and you have somebody in front of it with some scene that plays out, like laser ammo, smokeless range, where you've got somebody, kidnapping somebody, and you're like, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to get involved or not? Well, it's one-sided. It might get a little bit of your audio exclusion, time dilation, loss of dexterity, tunnel vision might come into play, but there's no bullets whizzing by your head. So that next level would be like the UTM, where now you got wax projectiles whizzing by your head, and you're like, oh crap, that pucker factor happens because you got something flying by you or hitting you. You're like, oh, what the hell was that?
So I suppose the question that I would really have in this, like in the basis of this firearms fact today, would be, I know there's a lot of things here that you have access to as a police officer. In fact, like the taser you have, there's like a law enforcement specific taser versus a civilian taser. So I guess really to establish sort of the ground basis for what we're dealing with in today's video, maybe it would be important to kind of go over just the technologies in general and what they are.
Okay.
So that people that aren't familiar with less lethal and what they are and how they work can have a bit of an idea to know what these terminologies mean. Like we know them because we're in the industry, we deal with it. But for the average person who's uncouth in this particular situation, what do they need to know about less lethal stuff?
Yeah.
And how can that apply to your average person in their everyday life?
Definitely. That
would be, I think, an important place to sort of start.
For sure. Great focus. So I guess to start as a general thought process, I call it your trifecta of tools, if you will. And the trifecta of tools being lethal, right? Your firearm, your knife. Those kind of things would be considered a lethal option. The less lethal could be a flashlight, just to strobe somebody, hit them, blunt force object like a Kubotan, right? Something like that.
Right, or maybe that light deters someone.
Exactly, throws them off their OODA loop, their OODA loop, so that you can get some.
And what light is that?
That's PowerTech flashlight.
What's the model on that one?
E9.
The E9, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that one's pretty well worn too. So you carry this one on your duty belt?
Time. Yep, all the time.
Nice.
And then from there you got pepper spray. You've got
taser,
flashlight with a different terms for it. It's an energy weapon, so this could be used for pain compliance more than anything. It's not gonna have them lock up, but it's gonna have them say, "Oh crap!" More than anything, it might be a deterrent where you go like that to somebody, they're gonna be like, "All right, man, I don't want none of you."
So basically, we're talking a cattle prod kind of, right? Like you're sort of
a cattle prod might lock you up and make you like oh crap and stop, but this will make you like, oh crap, that hurt.
And who makes this?
So that's Saber.
Yep,
that's about $40. There's
$40.
Yep, that's their the model.
Can I hit the button?
Yep, that one right there on that side.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, and then Taser, they make a one like this. They call it the Strike Light, which is a lot beefier. This is about $130.
Okay.
But it's a regular flashlight, but then it's also got.
Yeah. Ooh. Just that sound.
Yeah, right, and that's kind of the concept with it. It's a flashlight. It doubles as a deterrent, hopefully, but that next level of that would be if they come towards you, you can hit them with it, and they're going to jerk back. They're going to be like, oh, man, that hurt.
Right.
They're both, this one's AC. It's got an AC
you got
plug.
Strike bezel on the bottom, too.
Exactly, and like you see, it's weighted. It's got some weight to it.
You know what I like about these deep strike bezels on these particular types of devices, too, and one of the things I've liked about strike bezels is that also, like, all right, you're on the side of the road, you're trying to change a tire or something, and you may not always have the ability to, maybe you don't have a headlamp. Now, when you were talking about PowerTac earlier, I really like the PowerTac headlamp, and if that's a piece of gear that I strongly recommend, like, everybody buy one because they are so handy and they hold a charge forever and they're great. But the reason I mention it, you can take something with a strike bezel and turn the light on and just set it down like this, and the light will kind of diffuse and shine out and give you a little bit more of an indirect way to gather light too. So I do like the strike bezels because they let some light come out if you need to use it for that way.
For sure, and they double as a DNA collector too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, certainly some kinetic potential there.
For sure. And then this is kind of the best of both worlds. It's pepper spray, which is as active, so I won't be spraying it. But
please don't
flip top. And then it's also got a flashlight. So it's got a flashlight built right into it.
Just don't forget which end.
Yeah, right,
you're
exactly.
fidgeting in the dark and go, let me turn my flashlight on.
And that's also a Saber product that they make, which I like. I mean, it doubles as a flashlight and a pepper spray. And then here we've got same thing, flip top. But then we've also got a glass break and a seatbelt cutter right here.
Nice.
So this is a 3-in-1 concept.
So that becomes sort of a multifaceted safety device. Not only is it less lethal in the sense that you've got the pepper spray, but then you've got the functionality of being able to break glass, cut belts, which, that's smart.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep. And then the inerts that we can use for training so that,
Got you.
Yeah.
So that's water.
It's
so
water.
You can train people on how to use it,
exactly.
how to deploy it.
And as an instructor, I'll be like, well, it's pepper spray. How hard is it to, use pepper spray? But the thing is that I'll ask them, well, how would you hold it? And then I'll hand them or I'll just say, pick up a pen or a flashlight. Show me how you'd hold it. And usually I'll see them do this. And I'll be like, okay, try to punch me now. I'm like, huh? I'm like, punch me. Like, well, no, that'll hurt. Well, why will it hurt? Because you don't punch like this. right?
Right.
You know, punch somebody like that. So I say that's why you hold it like
grab
this.
it like
yeah,
this.
because now you got full fist. If
Yep.
you have an issue with the pepper spray where it doesn't work, or you run out of pepper, or they move, or they cover up, well, now you can double and punch them if you need to as a backup.
And it's also, I guess, worth noting too that you can simply discard it a hell of a lot easier too. If you do need to just let go of it, if it's no longer helpful to you, you can just simply get rid of it.
Yep. And even to go into further, I'll in my classes I'll teach to weak hand, support hand, whatever you want to call it, hold it so that way if you need to transition to a firearm, so now you can escalate and de-escalate force based on what that level of threat is. So that's another thing I get into, even with the Taser, the traditional Taser devices that we use in law enforcement. Same thing. Teach law
So
enforcement
compliance through energy type, direct contact, pepper spray. Okay, what else? Okay,
yeah,
I'm familiar with that sound.
So the typical Taser device, the law enforcement aspect of it. This is a civilian version that Taser creates. So this is a Pulse Plus, which has Bluetooth technology built into the battery. So it'll actually send a message out to dispatchers and such if there's any issue. And
wow,
this doesn't have the cartridge in it. Otherwise, it would have thrown. But there's the cartridge that's cased up, and we put that in there, and that's what shoots the two probes out. So this doubles as all Taser devices are stun guns as well as tasers, right? So the term Taser in the industry is because Taser created the device. It's like Band-Aid, right? When somebody says, I got a cut, can you give me a Band-Aid? You might not get a Band-Aid. You're going to get a bandage, but it might not be Band-Aid brand.
Right. So like earlier when I said, hey, well, the Taser, I'm sure that the industry as a whole, like when you look at Saber, for instance, like this is a great device. This is a very useful piece of gear for the money, right? But at the same time, I'm pretty sure they hate it when it says, oh, it's got a Taser on it. No.
Yep, for sure. And even confuse it more, people call this a stun gun.
Right.
Even though this looks like a gun.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a lot of confusion there, but basically the way to differentiate the two, they're all EWs, they're all electrical weapons.
Okay.
If it's pain compliance, which means you touch them with it and it doesn't incapacitate them, right? Neuromuscular incapacitation.
Yeah, sometimes you want them to be able to move, right?
Move away from you,
move
for sure.
away.
So that would be that would be a pain compliance device, which typically people call that a stun gun. And then something that would actually shoot probes out of it and cause NMI, neuromuscular incapacitation, which you see them lock up, they can't move, then that would be technically considered, people call it a Taser, but that would be actually NMI, neuromuscular incapacitation, which is the best of that.
Now, I noticed this cartridge. All right, this cartridge for the civilian version looks considerably smaller than the cartridge for the law enforcement version, so I can assume this one has more wire and goes further distance.
Yes, correct. And obviously you can see the difference in size too. This is a little bit larger, not too much, but it is a little bit larger for the law enforcement.
Is that a light on there on the X26?
It is. Yep.
How bright is it?
Nah, it's not too bright.
Just enough to kind of give you maybe a little bit of extra. If someone's close, maybe you can get a little bit better positive identification of where you're trying to.
Illumination in there.
So explain, like, for people that may not understand. So when this cartridge isn't in it, it acts more like just a contact, stun gun.
Right,
Pain
stun
compliance.
gun, exactly.
But when the cartridge is in it, those electrodes shoot out and they go into the skin, actually penetrate your body. And they have they almost look like little fish hooks, like barbs on the end of them. So they'll stay in, so they're hard to pull out. But you won't even have the ability to pull them out because you have a complete lockup. Yep. I've been shot with a Taser quite a few times, not only back in the military training when you have to be, have exposure to less than lethal. I know that bit just from being exposed to it. And then also, if you're going through mandate and they're teaching you about tasers, I know you've probably seen situations where people will be sitting in a circle and have their arms interlocked and they all ride the lightning together and just to show what those things can really do and how much it transfers. Yep. That is done under the guise of teaching you, hey, you need to make sure you're clear of this. You have to make sure that you don't become a part of that loop as well. So these actually shoot the barbs out that go into your body. And then, correct me if I'm wrong here, once that is doing its thing, you can pull the cartridge out while that person is being shocked and then put a new one in?
Well,
or do you have to wait until it's done?
You could do it, but you'll probably, if you're not careful, you could shock yourself. So the second the cartridge is pulled out, then the field ends, the actual connection ends. So you'd pull it out.
So say you need to stop it, that's how you stop it.
Right. So for instance, right, the law enforcement ones, like the X26 is this. The newer version of this would be like the X2, which has 2 cartridges and it's a lot bigger. So for this, it's a 5-second go. So it's going to go for 5 seconds. If I want to, I can turn it off within that 5 seconds.
Okay.
So now it stops. Now, if I do that, let's say for whatever reason I want another officer to come over and put cuffs on, detain somebody, and they start to come over, I could turn it off, let them start to put cuffs on. The person starts acting up. The officer could back off. I could turn it back on and then hit it again, and it's going to send the same.
So if the
voltage.
electrodes are still connected, you're connected.
Still on. Yeah. The negative usually is once somebody becomes once the voltage stops, the 5-second ride. If it's full 5 seconds or you stop it, once the voltage stops, they're back to full capacity again. So typically, if they know they've been hit, they're going to probably start, if they see wire, they might start trying to rip it out at that point. So that's why, usually it's you're giving commands so they can hear you giving commands. And then once the 5 seconds is over, their immediate response should be to comply. If they don't comply, then you light them up again.
Now, look, let's just be for real here, okay? Mm-hmm. We're 2 human beings sitting here in this room, and it's this reality, right? Like, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that law enforcement doesn't have a hard job. Like, I can understand where some of the stuff that y'all are exposed to can be really crappy to have to deal with. Now, I think that in the world of, let's just say, the reality that people die in police encounters, right? That's something that tends to constantly get put into our heads. Like, we see the one thing that happens on the news that gets spread in the news feed of the police doing something. Okay, we all screw up, but the police doing something, and then you have to hyper focus on that one negative thing that the police did, and then that somehow is supposed to let you think that all police are the same way. All right. Wouldn't it be better for someone to just swallow their pride and go, yeah, I got into a scuffle with the police a few weeks ago and they tased the ever-loving crap out of me 30 times. But you know what? I was drunk and I was being a jerk, but at least I'm not dead.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
right. So at the end of the day, like, how do law enforcement officers approach something like the X26, which, by the way, I want one of these bastards. Dude, this is cool. I'm getting one of these. But the point is, okay, how do law enforcement officers look at something like a taser, and how much more willing are they to go, you know what, we don't have to shoot this guy, let's tase him? Do they get used a lot? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I would say,
to diffuse a situation.
I would say that the first line of defense or the first line of compliance should be, officer presence, but then secondary would be verbal judo.
We're beyond that.
We are.
Okay, they're not listening.
Right.
The verbal judo didn't work. The presence didn't work. You have to do something.
Right. I would opt on the side of, I don't want to put my hands on somebody because they could have superhuman strength. They could be on drugs. They could have a weapon, right? So I would opt for something like taser or pepper spray as law enforcement to be able to try to get them in compliance before I go over and have to put hands on them if I need to, especially depending on the size of the person. If this person's big and I know it's just me or maybe another officer, I might be like, okay, well, it's just me and that person's on drugs or drunk, and they're also a big person. That might also make me decide to go in that sense. But
I mean, at the end of the day, we're all humans, right?
Yeah.
Like, we size people up, and it's like, I can take him or I can't.
Right.
Like,
or even if I say I can take him.
In the previous video, we were like, hey, I know what I'm capable of and what I'm not capable of. And it's like, hey, if you know you can't beat up a 350-pound dude that's walking muscle, then you might want to understand, hey, like.
And you said like 30 times. Usually SOP, standard operating procedure, for most agencies is no more than 3 iterations. Now, that might vary based on where they are in the country. But from what I've seen with the officers I've worked with across the country, it's usually about 3. Like, you don't do more than 3 5-second rides, because the thought process is it's less lethal. It's to get somebody in compliance. If you've done 3 iterations
and they're not listening,
then something's wrong. Something else has to happen. Maybe it's brute force. Maybe multiple
other officers. What if you can tell that, like, hey, this person's obviously on some substance. Yeah. He's obviously doped up.
Yep.
It's like, I mean, where in the world can you begin to draw the line of, okay, well, we just did 3 iterations. This guy's obviously out of his mind. Something's wrong. Now, does it mean that just because the guy is on some substance that his life is forfeit and, like, all right, no matter what, you have to just, do the unfortunate thing you have to do? Or is it like, hey, maybe we have a little compassion and understand that, we all go through rough situations, and like, hey, this guy might be drunk right now, but otherwise he may not be a bad person.
Sleep it off.
He's just a jerk when he's drunk, right? Like, that's so weird. It's like that paradigm where it's like, you've got to make sure you go home at the end of the day.
Right.
You got to make sure that, society as a whole isn't in some terrible situation where people are out, being jerks to each other and potentially hurting each other. But also it's like, man, at the end of the day, we're all human beings here, and we have to go like, well, man, like, how do you microanalyze, like, okay, what is the correct amount of force? Like, okay, this taser isn't working. Tough. What now? I mean, that's a tough thing. You have to kind of really have some nuance there.
And, even if that even transfers over to the civilian aspect of it, like, at some point, I tell my students, if all you're carrying is a gun and you have no other less lethal option, and the majority of the time you're going to get any kind of confrontation with somebody is going to be of a factor where you probably don't need to use the gun, what options do you have that you could deploy, right?
Yeah.
Officers have all these tools, and if I say, sir, you need to sit down, and the person doesn't sit down, then my next escalation is going to be to pull a gun and shoot you, right? There's a lot of stuff in between that we have tools for. And I try to get that across to civilians, too, that you should be having less lethal options. That second part of that trifecta that I was talking about, the trifecta of tools, is those less lethal options, because if you have the opportunity to do less lethal and you don't, and you use a firearm instead of maybe pepper spray or a stun gun or a taser or something like that, then that might be called into question in court.
Sure.
The major majority of the encounters we have with people are hopefully just going to be at the level of argument, maybe fist fights or something as you're younger, not as you get older, but where pepper spray might be more beneficial, right?
Sure.
And crowd control. I mean, if you're in the middle of a crowd and somebody starts shoving you around, I don't want to pull my gun out and shoot somebody that's trying to stab me. Then again, I don't want to pepper spray them if they're trying to stab me. I could shoot them, but I might hit somebody else. So I might opt, if I have the time to think about it, maybe my pepper spray is staged because I see them coming at me. All right, it's another option that you have versus having to say, well, all I have is a gun, so I hope I don't hit anybody, kind of thing.
Well, and I think that also, having those options, it's also paired with consequences of every action. I mean, every action ultimately has a reaction, right? So the thing is, all right, what if I am a civilian and I'm carrying this Pulse Plus, which, that is a slim little taser, but if I'm carrying that and say that for whatever reason, I've made the conscious decision to deploy it and use it as less than lethal, and I know it's less than lethal. But what if my adversary that I'm about to deploy this thing against doesn't know the difference between this and a real gun? And now, instead of de-escalating a situation, I've now escalated it to a position where now I'm getting a gun drawn on me, and I brought a taser to a gunfight.
Yeah, that's valid.
And didn't know it.
And actually, it's a good point you say. There's a company out there that I saw at SHOT Show that makes a gun. It makes a pepper ball gun that looks just like an actual firearm, like undistinguishable. And we see with Cerakote and all that stuff, we see guns that or pink and all these different colors, and the gun that they have, or I should say the pepper ball gun they have, looks just like a firearm. And my first thought to them, and they were pitching it to me at SHOT Show, I'm like, yeah, but what if somebody pulls that out to use less lethal force, and you got some cop or some citizen that's got a gun thinking that, okay, this person's got a gun pointed at this person that's running at them, or maybe they got their hands up.
Yep.
And you think, okay, this person's robbing them with a gun, and you pull your gun and shoot them, and then you find out it was just a pepper ball gun. So for out in public, something that looks like a gun, I mean, the Saber Launcher, which is this bad boy here, right? That's pretty hard to say that that's a gun. It kind of looks futuristic. I mean, it's shaped.
It's very toy-like.
It's very toy-like. It's oversized, right? It's bright orange. Like, who the hell is going to walk around with a bright orange handgun? Maybe some people, but very, very few.
If I saw it from a distance, I would assume it's just a toy.
Yeah, and you're not going to carry this in public. I mean, you could. We made a Kydex holster for this, but this isn't something you're typically going to carry in public and conceal easily. So this would be like a home defense pepper ball gun, right? Or pepper gun.
Okay, so this now takes the pepper spray concept and now puts it into
right. So you got
a cartridge.
Yep, you got these like paintball size balls that go inside the gun, and it's CO2, and the CO2 is what deploys it, just like a paintball gun kind of concept. Oh yeah. Really.
So it's got the force of a paintball gun?
I would say that or more, depending. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Doesn't feel good.
So they leave whelps on you.
Yeah, you can ask Clint.
We used to freeze our paintballs and shoot each other with frozen paintballs, and then a lot of kids started getting hurt back in the day. Now, we're talking, this has been a while, guys. Don't worry, you can't freeze paintballs still. And then they actually had to add additives to the paintballs to keep kids from freezing them because they were hurting each other with them.
Yeah, that's kids, man. We do.
I mean, we do dumb things.
Exactly.
But that's really cool. So, out of all the different, less lethal options. So it's like, not only is it an equipment related situation where we go, all right, here are the tools at our disposal.
Right.
Here's what we have to use. Now you've got this bouquet, if you will, of all these different tools that you can use. Then you have to have the tactics to go, oh, how do I deploy this in this way?
How do I hold it?
When do I use it? How do I hold it?
Where do I
there's
carry
a whole
it?
training regimen
Yeah.
that goes along with using less lethal.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. And what you had, a rubber knife?
Yeah. We got the next level training, the cert knife.
Gotcha.
It's just like
Okay. So that way you can actually get in there and kinetically, really
exactly.
do training and not hurt each other.
In
That's
my
smart.
my UTM civilian instructor class that I teach, one of the ones I'm down here teaching, I'll give these to the students. I'll just say, randomly, just walk around and stab each other, see if you're paying attention.
Forget which city it was in. It might have even been here in Atlanta, but it was one. I don't want. I'm at the risk of being wrong here. I'm just gonna let you know. I don't remember the exact city, but there's one city I noticed where a female officer, and I don't remember the female officer's name, but she went to draw a taser.
Yep.
And drew her Glock pistol instead and killed a guy.
It was Kim
and I think after the fact, even on the body cam footage, you could hear her going, "Oh, I didn't mean to do it." It was now look. So
she just got convicted.
So the thing is, it's like you obviously don't think that the person did it with malice. Of course they didn't, because they immediately went, "Oh my God, I didn't mean to." So you could tell there was that instant like remorse where she was like, "Oh, I didn't mean to do this. Oh my God," But all right, what are the dangers? Okay, so yes, you have this less than lethal option, and she intended to use her taser, but then used a real gun instead. So what are the training requirements and training type of things that have to be considered to make sure that these tools don't wind up being used in that type of way? I mean, it was an honest mistake.
For sure.
But was that a training deficiency? Was it just
Life-changing.
that she didn't train enough or spend enough time with it? Was it the department's fault for not providing a proper level of education and training on these items?
Exactly.
I mean, what was it?
So there's two thought processes on this. One you mentioned earlier as far as earlier I mentioned weak side, support side carry. And that's usually what I say for pepper spray and for tasers. I tell officers and civilians, carry it on your weak side, because that's definitively a different arm, right? You pull your gun with your dominant hand, and you pull your taser with your support hand. And if you do that, it's going to be less likely that you're going to mix that up. Whereas officers, the major majority of officers that I've worked with and seen, and I'm trying to change this mindset in law enforcement, they're cross-drawing their taser. So they're still using their dominant hand to draw either item. And
I've noticed a lot of guys will wear it like directly right up front, like appendix.
And they're
cross-draw,
cross-drawing.
where they can just go right across.
And tactically, that makes sense. And it's your strong hand. You want that. But there's two parts to that. One is I think Kim Petters, I think her name was, Kim Potter. But Kim Potter, in that situation, she drew it when she was expecting to draw her taser. She drew her firearm using the same hand.
Man, what an unfortunate situation.
Exactly. I mean, nobody made out good in that situation. So
it's not like she,
no, she didn't
and
mean
that's
it.
the thing. You can tell
What's
the
the
remorse
intent?
that she didn't mean to do it.
What's the intent in there? And of course, her agency everybody threw her under the bus and stuff like that. But if it was the other hand, would it have not happened? I don't know. But is the chances less likely? Would have been lessened? I think it would have drastically, right? The chances of her drawing it with her weak hand and doing that. And then the argument is, well, it's your weak hand, your sport hand, you're not going to have as much strength. Well, there's no recoil. There's a laser on it. I mean, what strength do you need?
Other than to maybe aim it properly.
A little bit of practice, right? Have a little practice with that. I mean, you should be practicing, be able to shoot weak hand anyways, right? You should be able to practice strong hand shooting and weak hand shooting, or support hand shooting, if you want to call it that.
Well, it's almost like when you look at, let's say, for instance, the whole ethos of medical practice, right? Like when a doctor, it's like their job is to do the best of their ability to try to save their patient. And if the patient dies, it's nothing personal. It's not that, they tried to maliciously.
Right.
And now I'm not going to say that like medical malpractice doesn't happen. Of course it does. Yeah. But I think I'm talking about the mindset.
Yep.
I'm not talking about the reality of how many people die on an operating table because people didn't do the right job or didn't do everything they could, or because that's the reality of the situation. I'm talking about the mindset.
Yep.
So the mindset of someone who wants to save lives, right? If a surgeon could save every single person they operated on, wouldn't that be their intent? To save every person, right? You don't want someone dying. That reflects on you. It's like
do no harm.
You want to have the pride of knowing that you saved somebody, right? So I kind of feel that people maybe need to look at the law enforcement aspect in kind of in the same way, where it's like you want to try and reduce the loss of human life in every single way that you can when possible.
For sure.
And that, yes, bad things happen, which are inevitably just part of the job, just like a surgeon can't affect, a person that dies on the operating table. If it's their time, it's their time. Like, the will to live is a thing. Now, those may not be direct comparisons in terms of the end result of what those people are accomplishing, but that there are byproducts of performing a certain type of job. And I'm not necessarily trying to say that in terms of a strictly anti or pro-police statement. It's just more that I think when you look at the intended consequence, like, there are a lot of people out there that don't mean to do anybody harm. They want to try to do the best that they can to mitigate the loss of human life.
Yeah.
And I think that is not just unique to police, that it's also obviously a civilian thing too. So if Taser has the foresight to say, well, civilians need these too, then maybe the concept is that from a holistic standpoint, that these things have the potential to preserve life in the same, so that maybe somebody doesn't have to take a life.
Yeah, for sure. There was an officer who had, female officer, I don't remember where it was in the country or not, but the female officer had more exposure. She exposed more people on the street to riding the lightning than anybody else in the
and they
department.
Probably didn't mess with her anymore, though. Don't mess with her. She'll tase you.
Right. Well, and the chief goes to her and goes, hey, and he just thought, he's like, have you ever been exposed? Have you ever, been hit with probes? She goes, nope, and I never will be. And the chief goes, no, you will be, or you won't have a job. And the thought process is if you've been tased, you're a little less reluctant to tase everybody. You might use verbal judo. You might, right? There's other things you can do because, yes, it's a tool. Thank God she wasn't going around shooting everybody. But could she have maybe talked him down a little bit more? Could she have had another officer presence to be able to see officer and force? Now that person might calm down because there's multiple officers there. She wasn't using those options as much as the chief would have liked. And rightfully so, what the other officers in the department were doing. So she got tased and her amount of exposures went down drastically because now she realizes that shit hurts. I don't want to get hit by that.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to try to talk people out of being bad so I don't have to hit them with it.
That's right. And, so I guess it's completely okay if you feel like the situation dictates to say, look, buddy, I don't want to use this freaking taser on you, but I will if I have to. And it's like, don't make me do it. And that's a way to at least have some empathy with somebody and go, look, buddy, I know you're having a bad night.
Well, and that's verbal judo.
I'm having a bad night too. You're having a bad night. Let's try to not have a bad night. Yeah. And if you want to continue having a bad night, we can make the night worse. Yeah. I mean, and that's just the reality of it. Human beings, I think, like the way we act, we are stubborn. Yeah. Like when some of us, when we're set in our ways, like we know we're right even when we're not right. And it's one of the things that I think our egos tend to really play into this really hard, where we are guilty of being self-aware, and part of that self-awareness and part of that ego is that, oh well, even when we're wrong, we're not wrong. It's kind of the same thing where, like, if you're a mother and your child can never do any wrong, no matter how bad they do something, no one's ever going to convince you that your child was wrong, even if they were. And I think that when you look at it from just sort of that egotistical standpoint of where we get at as people, that, in the long run, compliance is not something any of us are proud to be a part of. Like, no one wants to say, well, this person wanted me to do this, even though my will and my willpower, wanted something different. Mm-hmm. No one wants to admit, well, you know what, he talked me down on it, and you know what, I acquiesced to the situation, because it's against human nature. Right. Humans, in our nature, we don't want to acquiesce to a situation. We want to be in control of the situation. We want to feel like our way of doing things is the correct way and nothing will change it.
Stubborn.
There's a danger in that.
For sure.
I think that it's important for us all to look at situations objectively, right? Whether it's the applying and application of less than lethal force, when to apply it, when not to, mm-hmm. Maybe seeking out some training and going, like, okay, the situation where the officer had never gotten tased, and of course she was exposing the crap out of people, and then after she got tased, she wasn't as much. It's the same type of thing. To have a completely objective view on how you apply all of the equipment you have access to, you have to know every end of each extreme and where it can go to make a nuanced and balanced approach on how to use it.
Yeah, and the tools, if we look at the tools and we look at training in that sense, all law enforcement across the country, the states have a certain amount of training that's required for law enforcement. on an annual basis. Like in New York State, peace officers, typically it's one time a year. They got to go to the range. They got to do Article 35 use of force training. They got to do baton training, pepper spray. There's different training that we have to do annually. It's not a ton for peace officers. Police officers, it's usually twice a year and maybe a little bit more. And there's not a majority, but a very small minority of officers that'll actually go and spend their own time and their own money outside of that training to get even more training because they believe that they're not getting enough training, and I would agree with them. And if we look at that, why is that? Why do they mandate that? They mandate that because we're dealing with other humans, we're dealing with tools, less lethal tools, and we want to make sure that we make the best decision with the tools that we have and be able to use those tools in the most efficient and safest way possible, both for the officer and for the individual civilian. So that being said, shouldn't citizens that aren't sworn officers take that same level of importance and training, right? And look at it like, okay, yeah, if the officers have to do it, then maybe I should probably take it upon myself to know how to work this one weapon, this one tool to the best of my ability. If in case I have to use it, I don't want to hurt somebody else or misjudge the situation.
So maybe kind of putting yourself into Kim Potter's shoes in the standpoint of, what happened to Kim could happen to any of us if we don't take the time to learn how to use these devices correctly. I mean, if anything, as unfortunate as that is, and it sucks, and of course, no one ever wants to see something like that happen. No. It's tragic, right?
For sure.
But at the end of the day, okay, how do we learn from it?
Yeah.
I mean, think about warfare, right? Soldiers are in war, and you have to carry out these, crazy tasks that, are crazy. Go take that bunker on the hill. I mean, that's a very basic thing. But like, you think, okay, running up this hill is not good for me. Like, this is not good for my health to have bullets slung at me. But yet, we do what goes very much against our nature, and we carry out what we need to carry out. And like something bad happens. All right, on this raid, half our squad got wiped out or something. I'm being very generic here. But hypothetically, do you go, well, we're going to pack our things and go home? No, you reassess and go, how do we not get half our squad wiped out next time?
Yep.
So it's very easy to be discouraged, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for the average person to go, well, man, the media is just reporting all of this crap that's going on. And it's like, man, those cops are some real screw-ups, aren't they? Man, what a bunch of jerks. It's easy to make that decision,
sure.
But until you really, truly look at both sides of the equation and understand, well, you know what happened to Kim Potter wasn't mutually exclusive for her being a police officer, right? That what she did could happen to any of us who choose to carry less lethal versus a lethal, or to have both options on our person at any one given time. Right. So do you think that maybe the Potter situation, what happened with her, do you think that it was maybe just a lack of remedial training, and that maybe as a police agency, like their department should have maybe emphasized and put a little more emphasis on remedial training?
Yeah, I think that obviously training's a huge part of that. Annual training, repetitive training to make sure it's in in the neural pathways in the
sure.
So when the amygdala gets hijacked, it's going to the hippocampus, and whatever you've trained the most on, hopefully, is what you're going to pick up on. But as we know it, you're going to sink to the lowest level of training you have. So if the training you have is minimal or none, then it's kind of
that's always what you got to fall back on. Is
right.
Nothing.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the training is a crucial part of that, and I'm sure that the agencies, re-looking over everything, trying to decide. And there's some agencies that won't even let people carry tasers because of stuff like that.
Because they're worried more. They're so worried about the liability,
right?
That they're like, this isn't even a liability we want to introduce into the scenario. Do you think that maybe, I don't want you to give a whole lot of details if you don't feel comfortable talking about this, it's okay. But do you think that the police departments in general, when it comes to like the way that they budget out what they're spending on, let's say training, for instance, like they have a training budget, they go, all right, this is how much money we can spend on training this year. Do you think that, and if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to, but do you think that generally more police departments should maybe take a little more money to put towards training? Do you think that the way that all that pans out is worth maybe spending the extra money on more training?
So I would say I have no problem answering this, because this is something that I really, really try to get across to other chiefs and other sheriffs and stuff that I talk to, is there's not enough money going into training. I think that they should focus on not buying as many pens so they don't lose that budget money, and put that money towards more training, because that really is, an untrained officer out in the street, or an officer that's not trained enough, right? That's got the wrong training, old antiquated training as far as moving.
Well, they had to buy the tasers So if they bought the tasers to deploy them, then why are they not going to train on the proper use of them? If you have them, why aren't the people trained on them? That would be my logical question.
And these are just two examples. So first example is, and both of these are New York State corrections. So I'm pissing in their Cheerios, I guess. But I've got relatives and friends that work there. And one of the classes I did is a LEOSA class, Retired Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, and this was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And we had one of the officers was a retired corrections officer from New York State Corrections. And he gets done. I go, okay, unload and show clear. So he unloads his gun. He flips it over, looks down through the mag well, looks down through the breech, and then looks down the muzzle. Ooh. And I was like, whoa, what are you doing? Stop. And he's like, what do you mean? That's how they taught us how to do it. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Now, one of my co-instructors, he still is an instructor for Department of Corrections. And he goes, yeah, that's how they taught us how to do it. And I'm like, but they don't do the handgun anymore that way. I'm like, they don't do just the handgun? He goes, no, well, they still do rifles and shotguns that way. They make them look down the barrel. I'm like, right. So that's just one example of that. Now, here's another one when it comes to training.
On Sand Hill, they used to shove cleaning rods down the barrel. Oh, that's how they do. Yeah. You would walk off the line, and they put the cleaning rod down the barrel, and if you look and visually see the cleaning rod, then you know that bore, not only is the chamber empty, but the bore is clear too.
I like that better than looking down the muzzle.
I mean, that's better than looking down the muzzle.
True. And then another aspect of that is handguns. So they moved probably 4 or 5 years ago, they moved from revolvers to semi-automatics. Now, they had the semi-automatic handguns, and I won't remember what model Glock it was, but they had them in inventory for like years. But they didn't want to train the officers on how to transition from a revolver to a semi-automatic striker fire, right? So they just didn't implement them. And then some like bigwigs and New York State troopers, who are the ones that actually gave the handguns to them. So it wasn't even like they bought them. They actually got them down, like your big brother hands down your clothes, or hand-me-down guns from the New York State troopers to the New York State Corrections. And they weren't even using them because they didn't want to do the training. And then obviously the head-ups were like, well, you're not using these guns. We gave them to you. Are you kidding me? And then eventually, okay, fine. And they did the training. But so for 1 year, they had to go and qualify on revolvers and on semi-automatic handguns, right? So I think the training is a lot of times the first thing to go, the thing that's kind of like, well, we don't need training. You're carrying it. What more training do you need? You're using it in real life. Well, no, I'm not using it. I'm carrying it. That's not using it. That's totally different.
That's true. I mean, when you look at the amount of firearms instruction that, police departments were giving, let's say, back in the 70s and 80s, they were really focusing a heck of a lot on training and tactics and things. And it seems like it's almost like the law enforcement role has changed so much, over the years versus what it was, 30, 40 years ago. Now, without getting on that vein, I know we're really talking about less than lethal here, so I want to segue back to that.
Okay.
So we talked about, the training regimen, the training aspect of it. We talked about some of the different options that we have here. I have to say, out of all of the different less lethal, stuff that I've been not only hit with, but have messed around with over the years, I have to say that these are my favorite. I like the Taser, the X26, this is cool. The Pulse Plus, that's really neat. Mm-hmm. I have to say, I'd probably prefer one that can shoot a 26-footer. Yeah, that's just me. But here's the thing to consider, too. I have shot these Tasers at distance before, not 26 feet. So if you are going to, let's just say, carry and potentially deploy one of these things in some type of a situation, you need to make sure you understand the limitations and capabilities of your equipment. Yeah. And they do now. I'm glad I thought about this. They do make practice cartridges, don't they?
They do. They don't shoot any. No, well, they don't make them for the Pulse or the Pulse Plus, but they do make them for the law enforcement.
Okay, for practice. Yes. So maybe invest in some practice cartridges. Mm-hmm. And, get some time behind it so like exactly what's going on. And really, like, something else I'll mention, too. The way that I think about guns, right? If I'm going to carry a firearm and use it for any type of a situation, if I can't blindfold myself, okay, and reach down and be able to grab my pistol and know where the safety is and know where the magazine release is and be able to manipulate it and do whatever I'm going to do with my eyes closed, right? And be able to put it back in the holster and be able to just and then open my eyes and be, if I can't do it blindfolded, then I'm not proficient enough.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, in the very limited amount of time that I've handled this Taser, right, can I definitively say that I can do the same thing blindfolded that I can with my carry gun? And the answer is most certainly no. I'm not familiar with this device.
Right.
but that familiarity comes with time and practice.
The analogy I use for that, and that's awesome. You just made me think of an analogy I use when it comes to vehicles. In some of my classes, I'll tell my students, I say, hey, when the class is over, I want you to go out to your car, I want you to sit in your car, and I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to reach for something, and radio dial, wipers, whatever. Put your foot on the brake, put your foot on the gas. Do something that you do constantly, in and out, when you're driving your vehicle. And I guarantee you, you're gonna get within an inch of that item without having to look, because you know in the general area where it's at.
Yep, that muscle memory is important.
Right, that's the same exact concept with tools like this, that if you just, and I'll tell my students all the time when they get a pistol license, the pistol license in New York State tells you may buy a gun. Doesn't mean you know how to use the gun. Just like that driver's license you got when you were 16 told you may drive a car. Doesn't mean you knew how to drive a car.
Yeah, that's a very astute observation.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to wrap things up, and this was really intended to kind of give everybody an idea that if you're not familiar with Less Than Lethal, that there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm going to put some links in the description box below to some of this stuff. If it's something you want to look into and research, I'll provide some links just for your ability to look up some of this stuff. Also, make sure you check out the Meet the Pressers YouTube channel, their podcast. If you just look up Meet the Pressers, anywhere on all your social media platforms, you'll find Matt and his crew. Really good folks, and I appreciate you coming on the channel here today and discussing this with us.
It was fun.
Oh, well, that's not fun, but the discussion was fun.
It was.
Also, go over to Ballistic Ink and pick yourself up a snazzy new t-shirt. That's one way you can support our efforts. Check out our LLP, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit podcast. We post every Saturday here on the channel and every Friday on all your various podcast servers. Also, the Meet the Pressers podcast. Check them out. Really good folks. Many more videos on the way. I really appreciate the support. Have yourselves a great week, and we'll see you next time.